The White House was buzzing. Staffers rushed through hallways, producers tested equipment, and the press braced themselves for what was sure to be a headline-making event. The town hall special, A Moment with the President, was about to go live. Unlike a press conference or rally, this would be unscripted. No pre-approved questions. Just real Americans asking President Donald J. Trump whatever was on their minds. And Trump? He was ready. Inside his private dressing room, he straightened his red tie, admiring his reflection in a gold-framed mirror. Looking good. Great, actually. Better than Lincoln. Lincoln never did a town hall like this. He smirked, rolling his shoulders. A knock on the door. "Mr. President, we're ready," called an aide. Trump took one last glance at himself, then exited the room, his security detail falling in line as he strode down the hallway. An aide hurried beside him, keeping pace. "Sir, the crowd is mixed. Supporters, critics, students. Some are hostile. The media's expecting a confrontation." Trump waved a hand. "Confrontation? Please. Nobody handles tough questions better than me. People love my answers. You'll see." Backstage, the murmur of the audience filled the air. He could hear the restless shifting of bodies, the nervous excitement. He thrived on it. The moment he stepped onto the stage, the reaction was instant, a mix of applause, cheers, and a few scattered boos. The cameras zoomed in as he waved, flashing a confident grin. The moderator, a veteran anchor, greeted him. "Mr. President, thank you for being here." Trump nodded. "My pleasure. Tremendous event. People love these. Great energy in the room." The first few questions were standard: jobs, the economy, foreign policy. Trump answered them in his signature style, mixing humor, statistics, and jabs at the media. "Our economy. Booming. Absolutely booming. You won't hear that from the fake news, but people know. They feel it. Best jobs market in history." Applause. Some murmurs. A few skeptical head shakes. Next, immigration. "We're building the wall. Stronger than ever. And let me tell you, when you see what's happening at the border, you're gonna wish we built it 10 feet higher." A few chuckles. Some rolled eyes. Others clapped enthusiastically. Then, the moderator signaled for the next question. Our next question comes from Sarah Coleman, a student at Columbia University. A young woman approached the microphone. She was overweight, white, with green-dyed hair and thick-rimmed glasses. She wore an oversized Columbia hoodie covered in progressive pins. One read, "Trans Rights Now," another said, "Abolish Capitalism." Her expression was smug, rehearsed, as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. Trump leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlocked. "All right, Sarah. Let's hear it." She cleared her throat, making sure her voice carried. "Mr. President, as a leader of this country, don't you think it's dangerous and irresponsible to continue promoting outdated, oppressive ideas? The world has moved on from the old-fashioned, binary understanding of gender. Science proves gender is a spectrum. How can you, in good conscience, continue to deny this basic fact?" Some audience members leaned forward, eager. Others smirked, waiting for the inevitable. The cameras zoomed in on Trump's face, catching the flicker of amusement in his eyes. He blinked, tilted his head slightly, then chuckled. A slow, deliberate laugh. The smirk on his face widened. This was going to be fun. For a moment, there was silence. The audience waited, cameras zoomed in, and Sarah Coleman stood at the microphone, her arms crossed, her green-dyed hair practically glowing under the stage lights. She had a smug, expectant look on her face, the kind that said she was sure this was her moment. The moment she had planned for, rehearsed in front of the mirror, maybe even bragged about to her progressive friends back at Columbia University. Trump tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then, he let out a chuckle. A slow, deliberate laugh. "Oh wow," he said, shaking his head. "You know, I love these kinds of questions. Really, I do. Tremendous question. Very smart. Very tricky. People tell me all the time, sir, you get the hardest questions, and it's true. It's true. But you know what? I love it. Let's talk about it." He turned to the audience, palms up. "So, okay. We've got a young person here. Very passionate. Columbia University, folks. One of the best schools, they say. Very woke school. Very expensive. Your parents must be thrilled." Some chuckles rippled through the crowd. Sarah's smug expression faltered for half a second, but she quickly straightened up. Trump leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Now, Sarah, you don't mind if I call you Sarah, right? Or do I need to ask for preferred pronouns first?" The crowd erupted. Laughter, clapping, even some gasps from the more progressive attendees. The moderator shifted in his seat, adjusting his tie. Sarah's lips tightened. "That's not funny." "Oh, but it is funny," Trump said, grinning. "It's hilarious. See, here's the thing. You say there are many genders. Many, not two. And, believe me, I've heard this before. It used to be 2, then it was 5, then it was 12, then suddenly we're at 72. And now." He shrugged. "Nobody knows. You ask 10 people on a college campus how many genders there are, you'll get 10 different answers. It's incredible." More laughter. Sarah straightened, gripping the microphone. "Gender is a social construct, Mr. President. Science." "Oh, I love science," Trump interrupted, wagging a finger. "Big fan of science. Some would say I'm one of the most pro-science presidents ever. They've done studies on it. But let's talk about your science. Because last time I checked, biology, real science, not feelings, says there are 2 genders. Male, female, basic, simple. We all learned it in school. You remember school, right?" The audience burst into applause. Sarah's cheeks flushed red. "That's outdated thinking," she snapped. "Gender is fluid. People can identify however they want. If someone says they're non-binary, they are non-binary. Identity is about how we feel." Trump nodded slowly. "Okay. So if I say I'm 7 feet tall, does that make me 7 feet tall?" Sarah blinked. "That's not the same thing." Trump shrugged. "Seems pretty similar." The moderator cleared his throat. "Mr. President, let's try to keep this civil." "Oh, we're being very civil," Trump said, holding up a hand. "Nobody's being mean. We're having a discussion. A moment with the president, right?" He turned back to Sarah. "Now, you say identity is about feelings. Okay. So if I feel like I'm a chair, does that make me a chair?" The audience lost it. Laughter echoed across the room. Some clapped, others shook their heads, but nobody could deny the absurdity of it. Sarah scowled. "That's a strawman argument." "No, no, no," Trump said, wagging his finger. "See, I'm following your logic. If a person can wake up one morning and say, 'I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I'm something else,' and we all have to accept it, then why stop there? Why not say you're a wolf? Or a helicopter? I mean, let's be honest, you've got people on the internet identifying as animals. I saw a guy claiming he was a deer. A deer. Can you believe that?" The audience howled with laughter. Even some of the younger attendees, who had been sitting stiffly, stifled grins. Sarah's face twisted with frustration. "You're making a joke out of people's real experiences. People are suffering because of outdated views like yours." Trump held up his hands. "Hey, I don't want anybody suffering. We love people. Very pro-people, believe me. But listen, if we go down this road, where anyone can be anything, then where does it end? If I say I'm a woman, can I compete in women's sports?" Sarah hesitated. That's a complicated issue." Trump shook his head. "Not really. You take an average male athlete, tell him to put on a wig, and suddenly he's dominating women's sports. You think that's fair? Because I'll tell you who doesn't think it's fair, actual female athletes." Some of the women in the audience nodded in agreement. A few clapped. Sarah looked around, as if realizing for the first time that not everyone was on her side. She exhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous. You're all just a bunch of racist, sexist, homophobic bigots." A few gasps. Some groans. The energy in the room shifted. Trump leaned back in his chair, smiling. "Ah, there it is. The moment when the debate is lost, and boom. Insults. Beautiful. I knew it was coming. Didn't you all?" The audience laughed and clapped. Even the moderator, struggling to keep control, couldn't suppress a smirk. Sarah's face was beet red. "You're ignorant." Trump shrugged. "And you're leaving." The cameras caught it, her fists clenched, her breathing heavy. Then, with a frustrated huff, she spun around and stormed off, her oversized hoodie swaying as she disappeared backstage. The audience erupted. Cheers, laughter, applause. Trump turned to the moderator with a satisfied grin. "Wow. So tolerant. So open-minded. I love it." The moderator cleared his throat. "Well, that was certainly a passionate discussion." Trump smirked. "Hey, we're just having fun. Great discussion. People love this kind of thing." The night wasn't over, but the moment had already made history. Trump, sitting comfortably in his chair, adjusted his tie and smirked. "Wow. So much tolerance," he said, shaking his head. "You saw that, folks. They always say, we love open discussions. We want dialogue. But the second you disagree with them, boom, they run." Incredible. The audience clapped and laughed. The moderator cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "All right, let's move on to our next question." But Trump wasn't finished. "You know, I've seen this happen a lot," he continued, gesturing toward the empty microphone Sarah had left behind. "They come in, all confident, so sure they're about to deliver the knockout punch. They think, oh, I'm gonna destroy Trump tonight. Gonna go viral on TikTok. Gonna be a hero." And then, he snapped his fingers. Gone. Just like that. The laughter grew louder. A few members of the audience stood up, clapping. The energy in the room had shifted completely in Trump's favor. The moderator sighed, shifting in his seat. "Mr. President, while this is certainly an engaging discussion, we do have more questions." Trump leaned back, hands behind his head. "Hey, I love questions. I love talking to the people. But let me tell you something. You know what people don't love? They don't love being lectured by some 20-year-old kid who just finished a gender studies class and suddenly thinks they're Einstein." More laughter. Trump turned to the audience, shaking his head. "By the way, anyone know how much Columbia charges for that stuff? How much is tuition now? $70,000? $80,000? And they're teaching kids that men can get pregnant. Unbelievable." A roar of approval swept through the room. Some booed, but their voices were drowned out by applause. The moderator, visibly flustered, tried again. "All right, moving on." But suddenly, from the back of the room, a voice interrupted. "That wasn't funny." Heads turned. Cameras swiveled. It was her. Sarah Coleman was back. She had stormed back into the room, her face flushed with rage. Her fists were clenched at her sides, and her oversized hoodie, weighed down by activist pins, bounced as she stomped toward the microphone. The room went silent, anticipation thick in the air. Trump raised an eyebrow. "Oh, she's back, folks. Look at this. A comeback. Wow. I love it." He clapped his hands slowly, took a little break, got some fresh air. Maybe screamed into a pillow backstage. But she's back. The audience lost it. Laughter, cheers, even a few whistles. Sarah slammed her hands onto the microphone stand. "You're all laughing at something that's not a joke. You think this is funny. People like you are the problem. You're the reason trans people suffer. You're the reason people don't feel safe in this country. You're the reason." Trump held up a hand. Whoa, slow down. Take a breath. Maybe a sip of water. Relax." Sarah's nostrils flared. "I don't need to relax. I need you to understand that gender is not a binary, and you're spreading hate." Trump nodded. "Uh-huh. Okay. So let me get this straight. I, the guy who believes men are men and women are women, am the problem. Not you, standing here yelling at the top of your lungs, calling everyone in this room a bigot." Sarah pointed at the audience, her hand shaking. "They are bigots. They're laughing at human rights. They're—" Trump turned to the crowd, grinning. "Wow. You hear that, folks? All of you. Bigots. Every last one of you." The audience laughed, some sarcastically waving at Sarah. Someone in the back shouted, "Thanks for letting us know." Sarah's face twisted in rage. "You're all disgusting." Trump shook his head. I gotta be honest. This is not a great strategy. Walking into a room full of people and screaming at them? Not a good look. But hey, what do I know? Sarah gripped the microphone stand so hard her knuckles turned white. I can identify however I want. If I say I'm non-binary, then I am non-binary. If I say I'm a toilet, I'm a toilet. The audience erupted. Trump threw up his hands in mock surrender. All right. You heard it here first, folks. If Sarah says she's a toilet, then we gotta respect that. I mean, hey, it's 2025. Anything goes. Sarah's face turned scarlet. You're a monster, she screamed. Trump shrugged. Hey, your words, not mine. Sarah spun around, chest heaving, eyes darting around the audience. She pointed wildly. And you. And you. And you. Her voice cracked. You're all racist, sexist, transphobic, homophobic. She turned back to Trump. And you're the worst of them all. Trump smirked. You done. Sarah's breathing was erratic. She looked like she wanted to throw the microphone. Then, with a final shriek of frustration, she turned and stormed out. This time, she didn't come back. The room exploded into applause. Some people stood. A few chanted, USA, USA. Trump, basking in the moment, nodded approvingly. Wow. What a performance. Somebody get her an Oscar. The moderator, rubbing his temples, sighed. Mr. President, let's move on. Trump grinned. You got it. But I gotta say, that was one for the history books. The cameras caught every second. The internet was already ablaze. And Sarah. Her classmates at Columbia were probably deleting old tweets about how brave she was. Trump adjusted his tie, looking toward the audience with a smirk. Wow. So much tolerance, he said, shaking his head. You know, they always say they want dialogue. They want discussions. But the second they hear something they don't like, boom, they're out the door. The moderator, struggling to keep control, cleared his throat. Mr. President, I think we should move on. Trump raised a hand. Wait. Hold on. I just want to make sure I understand this. She said she could identify as anything she wanted, right? He gestured toward the empty microphone where Sarah had stood. A toilet, I think she said. The audience erupted again. A few people stood up, clapping. Someone in the back yelled, "Flush her out." Trump chuckled, shaking his head. Unbelievable. Columbia University, folks. 70 grand a year for this. The moderator, rubbing his temples, finally pushed forward. Mr. President, let's bring this discussion to a close. Final thoughts. Trump leaned back, crossing his arms. Final thoughts? Sure. He looked at the audience, his tone suddenly more serious. Listen, folks. This isn't about being mean. This isn't about hate or exclusion or whatever words they like to throw around. This is about reality. He spread his hands. We live in a world where people are being forced to accept things they know aren't true. And the second you question it, the second you say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, you're the bad guy. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Trump nodded. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it. Even the people who pretend not to. Because at the end of the day, when it really matters, they still rely on reality. He smirked. I mean, think about it. How many genders do they say exist? 100. 1,000. They keep making up new ones. But if they need emergency surgery, do they go, oh, give me a non-binary doctor? No. They want the best doctor. If they're being attacked, do they call a gender-fluid police officer? No. They want the strongest officer. When it's life or death, all this nonsense disappears. Because deep down, they know the truth. The audience clapped. A few shouted, "That's right." Trump continued, his voice firm. And let me tell you something else. This isn't about acceptance. It's about control. Because if they can make you say something you know isn't true, then they own you. That's why they get so angry. That's why Sarah lost her mind. Because I wouldn't play the game. And neither should you. Trump spread his hands. Listen, We all want people to be happy. If you're a guy and you want to wear a dress, fine. Knock yourself out. If you're a girl and you want to cut your hair short, go for it. America's a free country. But don't come into a room full of normal people and demand we all pretend biology isn't real. That's not freedom, that's delusion. Trump leaned into the microphone. And my advice to all of you? Stand your ground. Don't apologize for believing in reality. And never, never, let some blue-haired college kid tell you what to think. The audience exploded into cheers. The moderator, defeated, turned to the camera. That concludes our town hall with President Donald Trump. Thank you to all our participants, and good night. Meanwhile, backstage, Sarah sat in a chair, face buried in her hands. One of her friends tried to console her. They don't understand, she muttered. They're all brainwashed. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had walked into that room expecting to be the hero. Instead, she had become the punchline.